What's the worst crime you or someone in your family committed? Story 1. My friend got blackout drunk and stole a bulldozer that had the keys left in it. He turned it on and obviously didn't know how to drive it, so he just ended up making the scoopy part go up and down for a bit before the cops came. They actually let him go, too. The worst part is, this isn't exactly rare. They leave the keys in the things all the time. Plus, I think there are only a few different cuts of the keys they use. At least, that's how it used to be. I know someone who was getting their street worked on, and they left the thing parked in a way that kinda blocked his driveway. So he went out, used his ring of keys until he found the one that fit it, and drove it across the street and parked it. I hope they were really confused about how it moved. We lived in a new development that still had houses going up. My neighbor was a cop in another city. He decided that he wasn't going to do the wheelbarrow and shovel bit. Walked down the road and came back with a bobcat. He moved all the gravel, took the bobcat back, and except for us, nobody had any idea what he had done. He didn't even think twice about it. One of my all-time growing up stories involves a bulldozer. I grew up in a small town that had a little housing boom in the 1990s. For years, all the woods were being cleared away for new streets and homes, so we would play in the work sites whenever we could, rock fights mostly. One summer, some friends and I came across a mini dozer and mini scoop outside of construction and found the keys still inside. We flipped. We were probably 14. After a few minutes, we managed to turn them on. We really only managed to make the scoop crawl forward, just enough to bump the other machine. We were losing it laughing and trying to dig a hole. At some point, we see a truck coming down the road. It was a dead road, so we assumed the worst. We got out of the machines and started running. This truck comes flying and skids to a halt. This unbelievable Chad exits the truck just fuming. The road was surrounded by woods, so we took off, but we split into two groups. Buddy goes after the other group into the woods. My friend and I went through the woods and back to one of the missing kids' houses to wait. They turn up like 5 or 10 minutes later, all quiet and pathetic. Turns out Buddy caught up to them, grabbed my biggest friend, big for his age but still 14, and just started delivering his body blows and saying something about respect, etc. All the while, my friend just stood there quiet as a mouse. After about 5 or 7 punches, the man was satisfied and left. I gotta say, we never did that again, nor did we tell our parents, all of whom would have been more angry about our petty crime than our physical well-being. Army parents, the 90s, etc. Story 2. My sister-in-law worked on a ski hill. One week, there was a promotion by a company where they would blow up big inflatables, like the big gorillas you see in car lots. She had seen them blow them up and deflate them for days, so she knew what the deflated ones looked like. One day, she was leaving work and one of these deflated mascot thingies was right behind her car. My sister-in-law has never stolen anything in her entire life, but at that moment, she decided out of the blue that she wanted that blow-up. She plopped it in the back and drove home. When I came to visit a couple weeks later, she was freaking out a bit. She asked me if I wanted it, just to get the evidence out of her house. That is the story of how I came to own a 2-story high inflatable cow. Sometimes the guilt gets to you. An ex-friend of mine had her jacket stolen from the bar. A week later, she sees the same jacket, thinks it's hers, and proceeds to steal it. For whatever reason, she wasn't 100% sure that it was hers, so she would then never wear it out, of fear the person that she may have stolen it from would recognize it. Months later, I think she placed it in the lost and found as the guilt ate her alive. I'm certain it was the exact same jacket that she had stolen, but whatever. I have a similar story, but not really a crime per se. This happened about 5 or 6 years ago. My cousin, who works in building maintenance in New York City, called me up saying that one of the tenants, commercial, has vacated the space and left behind a bunch of stuff. Usually, when tenants leave, they leave behind what they don't want, and the building has to get rid of it to make room for new tenants. My cousin had already scoped out a few items that he said he wanted and wanted a hand to bring them home. I get there and he brings me to the building and shows me around the space. As we are walking around, out of the corner of my eye, I see this 7x7 huge bag. As I open the bag, my mind goes immediately to, this is a bouncy castle. Why do they have a bouncy castle inside of a tenant space? I need this bouncy castle. So we load up a few items and head home. I unloaded the bag into my garage, and as it was quite late when we got home, I left the bag there. Fast forward a few weeks, and my buddy and I decide to inflate this thing and see how big it really is. We roll the bag out of the garage, easily 40 to 50 pounds, and lay it on the ground, and it goes right across the yard. My backyard isn't the biggest either, but you could fit a few cars back there. So we start inflating this thing, and it doesn't quite look like a bouncy castle as it's being being blown up, and it's only getting bigger and bigger. We realized that there was a flap that was open, that was not allowing the air to stay in, so once we closed it up, it blew up pretty quickly. That's when we realized it wasn't a bouncy castle, but a 2-story gorilla with a gold chain. I ended up giving it to another cousin who has quite a bit more land than I do, and that's how my aunt ended up with a 2-story gorilla at her 50th birthday party. My friends and I have a similar story. We were all a part of an organization together and had a competition the following day. We had a last-minute practice the night before and then went to one of our houses to hang out. One thing turned into another, and it's super late, but we wanted coffee because teenage brains thought pulling an all-nighter and going to this competition the next day was brilliant. So we loaded into one of the older guy's mom's minivans he had and took off in search of coffee. Somehow, we ended up 2 hours away from our small town because no one wanted the local coffee shop, and on the way back, we came across an inflated Energizer bunny, which the guys thought would be a brilliant mascot for the next day, so it got stuffed into the back of the van with some pylons, because why not, and made it back to town to see our adult chaperone for the tournament outside the hall we were to meet at waiting. So he got to see us roll up all together on zero sleep with a random assortment of pylons and an inflatable Energizer bunny. I have no idea what went through his mind at that point, but we did terribly at the competition. And from what I heard, the bunny lived in one of our friends' bedrooms until he went to university. No idea what happened to it from there. Story 3. My dad's older brother came home from the war in Vietnam to find that his wife had been cheating on him with his best friend. He locked them both in the friend's house and burned it down with them in it. He held the firefighters off with a rifle until he was sure they couldn't be saved. Then he shot himself. This was before I was born, but I've seen some newspaper clippings about it. I asked my mother about it, and she said that he locked them together in a small bedroom closet and barricaded the door from the outside so that they couldn't get out. This was in the 1970s in New Orleans. I'm not going to give more info, as it'd be easy to tie back to me, same last name, or his daughter, who was a little under 2 years old at the time, and I don't want that. Story 4. A distant cousin got her terminally ill father to give her power of attorney and then stole all of his money so that she wouldn't have to split it with her brother. A guy I went to school with in the 70s emptied his dementia-ridden father's life savings while he lived with him, 60-some years old and still stealing to support his coke habit. His sister found out and he did 5 years, restitution, $80K, no way he'll live long enough to pay that back, and 8 years probation. Something similar happened to my uncle, except he wasn't terminally ill. He was working in China and his longtime partner was trying to poison him with food and pills she sent him. Meanwhile, at home, she got power of attorney and put him hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, buying expensive stuff, paying off her kids' debt, etc. She went to the bank and got a friend to forge the POA. He finally realized that he felt sick whenever he took the items she gave him and found out what she was doing. He came home and tried to get her arrested, but I don't think she ended up doing much time at all. He's still in huge debt from her and mainly lives in the Philippines. This exact story is in every family, I think. The way the other side is told is, a distant cousin quit her job to spend 2 years taking care of her father who had failing health. As a reward to help offset the year of her life put on pause and to show his gratitude, the father changed his will at the very end to give her the full inheritance. The indignant brother, who didn't even travel to see his father on his deathbed, then threw a huge fit and launched a bunch of lawsuits at his sibling. I took care of my mother-in-law for a full decade, and a few family members were pissed when she complained we'd taken her bank cards away because she was vulnerable to phone scammers. Her entire income was $600 a month, which paid for 2 weeks worth of insulin. We paid for every single other thing and spoiled her rotten besides. And it seemed much crueler to take away her phone. But somehow, not letting her give money to the fake IRS was a bridge too far for a couple of people. Story 5. It's not a bad crime or anything, but it was illegal at the time. So, in Germany, up until a few years ago, we still had a general draft for the army, and a generation ago, it was very hard to get out of it. My uncle was a hardcore pacifist, so going to the army wasn't an option for him. But being accepted as a conscientious objector at the time basically required you to be a devout Christian and use the Bible as an argument for why you couldn't kill another human. And my uncle was also an atheist. He couldn't realistically categorically object, didn't want to go to the army, and didn't want to go to jail too. So he waited. He got sent his draft notice, passed the physical, and got a letter telling him to report to X company under Sergeant Y. He wrote back a reply on rose-colored paper, scented with perfume, about how much he was looking forward to serving under the strong leadership of Y, promising to obey every one of his orders, and that he can't wait to experience life in the barracks together with so many strong and muscular men. He was declared unfit for service shortly after. My dad wanted to do a replacement civil service also in Germany. At his time, usually, a third got denied. He was the unlucky third. Filed a complaint, got denied again, another complaint, etc. He dragged it out until he was 26, married, and then had me. They let him off then, or else they'd have to pay him more for having a wife and kid, and that wasn't worth it for someone just doing a year of military service. Reminds me of two stories. My grandfather grew up in rural southeast Germany during World War II and emigrated to the States several years after it ended. After settling and starting his family, he got called up for jury duty at a rather inopportune time. Unable to get his duty dismissed, he was eventually called up for a jury selection. When the lawyers started asking him his views on crime and whatnot, his response, with his very thick Bavarian accent getting thicker, was to the effect of, Ja, mein Wasser was in the SS. He wasn't. And I say, we should kill them all. Oddly enough, his services were no longer required after that. And aside from that, one of my best friends is in the US Marine Corps. And after boot camp, he was at the school for his job, where they would have regular barracks rooms inspections. His unit just received a heads up that an inspection would be incoming in a few minutes. While his room was clean, it wasn't Marine TM clean. While trying to decide what to do, his roommate notices the towels and large bottle of lotion still out from where they had gone to the beach over the weekend. 5 minutes later, their staff sergeant calls everyone out for inspection and the students all stand outside their doors at attention. My friend and his roommate are notably wearing nothing but their boxers. Sergeant gets to their room and walks in. He quickly sees their two beds pushed together, towels laid over the beds, and lotion displayed quite prominently nearby. 5 seconds later, he has about face and is walking out of their room saying, "I don't know. I don't want to know." They passed the inspection. Story 6. My dad, when he was much younger and infinitely more stupid, regularly used to drink and drive with his friends. It was the early 70s and no one really cared. To hear him speak about it now, he can't believe how stupid he was. One night, he and his friend were out drinking. They heard there was a party going on at a pub across town and decided to head over. On the way, they go past a large club with a queue of people waiting to go in. My dad decides to show off a bit and pull a skid. He miscalculated, hit a curb and flipped the car, sliding down the road on his roof. The car stops, they get out and leg it to the cheers of the people in the queue. They get the bus back home and immediately call the police to report the car as stolen. The police knew what had happened, but couldn't prove anything. Me and my brother did this once. No crowd, we had just drank too much at a family Christmas gathering. I'm a mechanic and we started talking about 4x4 and winter tires and stuff. He says, "My truck is bulletproof. Watch this." He proceeds to flip the truck onto my passenger side door. We're drunk. I ask if we stay or run, as I'm really in no trouble here. So we leave, walk to my house a few blocks away and go to sleep. He wakes up and immediately reports the truck is stolen. Must have dropped my keys outside. They didn't believe him, but couldn't prove otherwise. My dad used to tell me about the good old days when you could drink and drive. Apparently the cans used to be heavier, made of tin or steel instead of aluminum. Either way, they were heavy enough that my dad could finish a beer, crush the can, and toss it left-handed out the driver's window over the roof of the car, hitting street signs on the side of the road. That was until aluminum ruined the sport. He did a lot of stupid things in his youth, and I've learned from his example. My dad talks about the good old days when cops would just pull you over and empty the beers in your car if they caught you drinking and driving. He used to drink and drive with my brothers and me in the car when we were kids too. The fact he would still do it if he wouldn't get in trouble, putting other people's lives in danger, really pisses me off. My dad tells me that if you got stopped, the police would just ask if someone else in the car was alright to drive. Crazy times. Story 7. My cousin got busted robbing a bank, got sentenced to jail, proceeded to break out of jail with his cellmate and went on the run. Fast forward a few months and he's living in a hotel room with his cellmate. The cellmate orders a pizza to the room. Bad idea. The delivery guy recognized them and reported them to the police. They got arrested again, and shortly after, my cousin killed himself in prison. My cousin had a wife and a kid and got into a nasty coke habit. We don't bring him up anymore. My dad saw a bank robbery happen, watched the ink sacs blow up all over the guy's face, and chased him in his own car with a car phone, back when cell phones were rare and the size of an ammo can. He was a phone salesman, called the cops and directed them to him. 4 years later, he gets summoned to jury duty as a juror and gets chosen. Comes to find out it was the same guy now on trial for the bank heist he watched happen. And that's the story of how he became a witness for the trial and was banned from future jury duty. Damn, that's a story. I have an uncle who robbed a jewelry store out in Arizona, and the worst yet, I have another uncle who killed his parents. My aunt and her husband found them days later when they went to check on them, tied to chairs and bound in plastic wrap. He beat them with a wooden bat until it broke. They were not dead yet, so he got an aluminum bat from the store and came back to finish the job. The police caught him days later at a casino in Pennsylvania using their credit card. Apparently he killed them for more money to gamble. I don't know, it doesn't add up to me. This happened like last year. Sucks. My sister's now ex-husband went off the deep end after a back injury, and opiates reignited an old addiction from childhood. Fast forward 6 months later, he would spontaneously disappear for a week here or there, acting crazy. We snuck my sister and her kids out during one of these, and a month or so later he robbed 4 banks in one day, because of an old record from when he was 18. He was in his 30s now, they threw the book at him and he's doing 4 counts of 20 years with no parole. His life is effectively over. Before that, he was a loving father and good husband for almost a decade, according to my sister. Story 8. My grandfather's father was a mean, abusive, hateful drunk who would come home from working in the mines long enough to terrorize his children and impregnate his wife, and then leave again for more work. He tried to set the house on fire with his wife and kids, 13 of them inside, twice. One day, my grandfather and a couple of his siblings were picking berries across the road from the house, and his drunk father started taking pot shots at them with a rifle. My grandpa, one brother and his oldest sister, took off running for the house with the agreement that the first one there would kill him, their father. My grandpa's sister got there first and shot him to death. She was never charged with a crime due to her age and the fact that everyone knew my great-grandfather was a mean SOB and had it coming. I have a very similar story from an elderly friend from church. Same drunk father situation, but also did weird stuff with her mom and sisters until my friend had enough. She decided she was going to kill him that day. While he was in the field, she went and got either his gun or an axe, I can't remember. On her way to kill him, she swears to God that lightning struck out of the clear blue sky, killing him dead. She just buried him where he lay. The cops showed up a couple of days later because the father's bar of choice called after not seeing him for a couple of days. The officer came over, she showed him the grave, told him what had happened, and that was that. Oh, also she's been married to that cop for like 50 or 60 years now. It's one of my favorite stories. Wife of the original poster chiming in, the lady was both my Sunday school teacher and my home ec teacher in high school. We'll call her June. June was 15 when this happened. She's the oldest of 8 kids. After her mom had the second kid, her dad beat her until she was paraplegic, and the dad just kept raping her mom and more babies kept coming. June delivered 6 of her siblings. Dad started to rape her younger siblings, and she had enough. Dad was passed out in the field one morning when June went out to milk the cow, so she grabbed an axe and went to finish him. And boom. This happened in the early 40s, and she ran the farm until her mom died. Then she and her husband, the cop, took in her youngest siblings and left town. She still tells these stories like they happened yesterday. Story 9. My dad's side of the family grew up as New Hampshire hicks. My grandfather was stabbed in 2 different bar fights and burned down an entire country club because he thought they were too stuck up. He was never caught and went on to earn a bronze and silver star in the Korean War, but unfortunately lost his leg too. Since this is getting some attention, I thought I might add that my grandfather got his crap together, started a successful small business, and as a funny twist later joined that same country club as an old man. He never really felt welcome there, my dad said though. They weren't really his kind of people. Local cops probably agreed about the country club and looked the other way. Small town New Hampshire used to be something else. I remember talking to folks who moved here, and they said I was a downer since I know quite a few folks who are dead now. I'm just like, is it really that normal to have all your graduating class survive? We always lost a few to booze and winter conditions. Then, as an adult, workplace accidents are still things in logging industries, though not as bad as when my dad was working. I met one of my dad's friends and he was dead the next day due to a tree falling the wrong way. Sometimes I wonder if that is why we are so live free or die, because death was more common due to accidents than elsewhere. So F it. Go have some fun. Story 10. My cousin in Ohio used to rob people selling goods on Facebook. They got caught after he and an accomplice murdered a man over a PS3. Good times. I'm gonna have to find this story. If it was around 2007, my high school friend was selling a whole lot of certain drugs to a kid in Youngstown. He ended up murdering the kid. They both were kids, both around 16, after seeing the money and left. Dummy high school friend didn't think about the kid's cell phone and who he last talked to. Ended up, the case made court TV or whatever that BS was because the dad was so mad, rightfully so, and hopped the barricade in court to attack the high school friend. Clifford Harris was his name. The dad ended up biting Clifford's ear or something if I remember this correctly. We in high school were shocked because Clifford was always so quiet and nice. Went to Youngstown State for a few semesters. Some of the faculty told us to carry pepper spray, put our keys between our fingers or walk in groups, and never park in the decks after dark. I got notifications on 2 occasions that there had been a violent attack in the parking deck and to get campus security to walk you to your vehicle if it was in that parking lot. Back in 2008 or 2009 when I was a student, we got warnings about a man with an axe on campus. The art classes were usually 5 to 8, but they usually ran open labs until 10, and some were 24-hour open rooms for students. It was terrifying leaving class at 8 with weird people back behind the museum. We did not even get a parking deck in the art department. We had a lot behind the building tucked down by Salem's Hollow off Wick Avenue. I sold a PS4 on Facebook a few years ago and still think about that strange interaction. It was a girl who said it was a gift for her boyfriend, and her boyfriend came with her. She just looked so damn nervous the whole time, and he got out of the car with her and just stood there watching. She kept looking over at him. I'm a stupid, talkative oversharer and casually mentioned that I didn't want to get rid of it, but I had to afford to give my 3-year-old a birthday. Right after I said that, she glanced at him again and he told her to give me the money. That was it. I always just thought it was a really weird interaction until now, but now you've got me wondering if I was about to get robbed. They were the only ones to contact me and not try to haggle on price or anything. Agreed with it all and met up immediately. Story 11. I worked at a movie theater when Back to the Future was originally released. We used to take the entire movie ticket instead of tearing them and reselling them to the next group coming in. The old theater was massive. There were 600 people. We probably made about $15K between the two of us in a month or so. Adjusted for inflation, it's about $37K. We were the richest high school kids in our town. We used to charge customers full price for their meals at KFC, but then only brought the chicken to the register and pocketed the cash when I was young. I was careful not to overdo it, but I made about $60 on my shift. Reminds me of working at Logan's with their soup and salad specials. Ring up the first order and leave it open when it's paid for in cash. Every other person who ordered it and paid in cash would get the same receipt, but the cash was pocketed by the server. If a customer paid with a card, then it was rung up and closed out as normal. But for every one of those orders past the first, which was eventually closed out at the end of the shift. Easy money. I ran a cinema in London's West End that uncovered staff running a similar scheme. We installed hidden surveillance cameras for several weeks until we could identify all those who were involved. Turned out to be more than half of the staff across various departments. We scheduled all of them to be working on the same shift and confronted them at the end of the night with police present. They were given the option to face charges or to resign, forfeit their final pay, much less than what they had been stealing, and be unable to use the cinema as a reference. All of them took the deal. We then had several weeks of confused regulars who were shocked to find they were no longer able to get their under-the-table discounts they were accustomed to. Story 12. When I was a young teen, the boys from the neighborhood and I loved playing pinball and video games at our local bowling alley. The problem was we didn't have enough money to enjoy our new addiction. We decided to do something about that little problem. We started with a very rudimentary system. We actually scotch taped a piece of thread to a quarter and were able to fish it up and down a couple times before the string would break or the tape would give out. This worked fairly well, but we wanted and needed more. Our next plan was a little bit more professional. We somehow concocted a scheme to make quarters. A few lessons in science class had actually stuck, and we realized that we needed something to fool the coin mechanism in the pinball machine into thinking that whatever it was we made our quarters with was an actual quarter. We ended up deciding that lead would be our material of choice. We used lead for a couple of reasons. A couple of the guy's fathers were avid hunters. He even reloaded his own shotgun shells because of this. We had a burner set up in his shop to melt down the lead. Another reason is that lead is not magnetic. Science. We made a mold out of plaster and used the burner to melt lead to make our quarters. But where to get more leads? One of us came up with the brilliant thought that tire weights were made of lead. Carrying screwdrivers and pliers, we scoured the parking lot of shopping centers. We would wander through and drop down out of sight between cars. Using the tools we had brought, we would manage to get the tire weights off with little trouble. We were in business. Our production line was soon up and running. We would melt lead, pour it into our mold, cool it, and then move on to finishing our new quarter. The finishing process was crude but effective. We would snip off the burr where the lead was poured. We would then file down the edge, making sure it stayed mostly round. Using steel wool and a polishing cloth, we would then shine the quarters. Now comes the trial run. We went to the bowling alley with a few quarters to see if our harebrained scheme would actually work. They went, and the pinball machine lit up and was ready to be played. Success. We intensified our production, and soon we had a bunch of quarters. We were thrilled. We could play video games anytime we wanted. Every day after school, you'd find us at the bowling alley happily playing our games. But our downfall was soon to come. We never thought of the fact that someone might notice a bunch of fake quarters being used in their video games and pinball machines. It literally never crossed our early teenage minds. We just knew we were having a blast. One fateful day, we went to the bowling alley as usual. We started playing games, and soon some men approached us. They started questioning us and accusing us. We were scared to death. One of the guys yelled, "Run!" and we took off as fast as we could. We made it to the doors, and down the steps we went. We all lived on the same cul-de-sac, and that's the direction we headed. Running as fast as we could, we briefly split up. The men that were chasing us only followed one of the kids. He made the colossal mistake of running straight to his house and through the front door. From there, our crime spree ended. A few days later, I was in class when I was called to the office. When I got there, my father was sitting with a man I'd never seen before. He was wearing a black suit and a black tie. I had to go before the principal, my father, and a member of the United States Secret Service. Although they take the counterfeiting of US currency very seriously, they understood that it was just a bunch of knucklehead kids making quarters to play video games. He actually told me that he was impressed with the quality of the quarters. He also said that they had recovered over $75 in fake quarters, that we had made and used over 300 quarters. We had to make restitution for the money, and the charge was placed in our juvenile records. It was explained to us that if we kept our noses clean, the charge would be expunged. Luckily for me, I learned my lesson and stayed on the straight and narrow for the rest of my young adult life. And that is how I was charged with counterfeiting US currency. If that doesn't define the meaning of a crazy crime, I don't know what would. Story 13. My husband's dad killed the guy who his then-girlfriend was cheating on him with. He was supposed to serve a life term but got out because of a clerical error. He did manual labor on a local park, and apparently the guys who helped were supposed to get a reduced sentence. However, he was not supposed to. I think my husband talked about it once. Also, my husband's half-brother, the same murderous dad, killed his business partner. He would have gotten away with it. However, he moved the body when he found out construction was going to start in that spot. And what were they going to build there? A prison. He's currently serving a life sentence. My husband has never met his half-brother. He also has two half-sisters from the same dad who are law-abiding citizens. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. If you have a similar story that you feel comfortable sharing with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like, and don't forget to subscribe. It really helps. For more videos like this one right now, please feel free to stop by our channel and pick one. Thanks again, and see you next time!